Before we had to watch the return of the X-Men back on the small screen this Wednesday, I had to take a look back at all the recent X-Men episodes that were on Disney Plus, and I gotta say, without a doubt, man, they don't make them like they used to. So X-Men the Animated Series was a show that ran from 1992 to 1997 that was the first comic adaptation of the X-Men and also my introduction to basically the whole Marvel franchise because I experienced the show week to week when it was on Jetix on Disney and every Saturday morning as opposed to Fox Kids actually showed the episodes one by one showing different types of episodes and storylines of the X-Men and I got to say back in my day when I was being introduced to all these different characters I grew up with characters like Batman, Superman, all the DC, the actual superheroes that everybody knows that are most iconic. When I switched the channel, I already found out about the Marvel characters through Jetix, like X-Men, Spider-Man, Iron Man, Hulk, all those different characters I actually learned from Jetix. And rewatching X-Men the animated series on Disney Plus, I gotta say, after looking at the show from season 1 to season 5, it is without a doubt that every time I look at the X-Men, it's more the fact that these are the most iconic characters of all time. And every time they do an episode, it's kind of funny that the way I remember in my head is different from the way I'm actually looking at it portrayed on the big screen or on the TV show. Let me start off with the characters for a moment. Like our main team lineup of Wolverine, Cyclops, Jean, Storm, Rogue, Gambit, Beast, for the most part, in season 1 in case all those characters actually had something to do in the series because I remember the team dynamic where Logan was the lone wolf, Scott was the boy scout who always wanted to do right. We had some of the other characters actually join in on the missions, especially Storm, because I remember back when Storm was one of the main leaders I saw in the X Men movies, but then I was like, they don't use her enough. But then watching the anime series, I'm like, damn, they make every specific character feel well within the episode, and each of them have a purpose in being there. Some characters I remember best, and others I can say without a doubt Wolverine. I got that influence. I'm like, yeah, Wolverine's gonna be my favorite out of all these characters. But after rewatching the whole series, the most developed character I've seen is Cyclops because I remember watching the show, and then when I watched the movies right after, I'm like, Cyclops is just a Boy Scout that he's always up against Wolverine for some reason, and he hasn't had much to do as the team leader of the X Men. But in this show, I'm like, wow, yeah, I can say without a doubt, with all the stuff I've seen with him being a leader and actually care for his team, yes, he made some cocky decisions in the beginning, but I gotta say, even though he did it for the right reasons, you gotta remember that Charles Xavier in this show appointed the X-Men to actually be better than what they are and actually help people understand mutants because that's another thing I could say with this within this show. The way they show mutants in the show is like we know the characters of the X-Men to be people with powers, enhanced human beings, but in this show, I remember it, but also was the thing that I actually understand what the X-Men represent is that X-Men in this show, they're more seen as the outcast or more abominations of human beings where the actual government racist federals actually hunting them down. The FOH, the Friends of Humanity in this case, they actually showed it from a way where the X-Men, as I saw it as a kid until I learned it in the history books, the X-Men are basically about race. Two different opposing sides of humans and mutants. Magneto, in this case, people saw him as Malcolm X, that only represent for his people, that he wanted only good for mutants, and Charles Xavier was the guy keeping the peace. Basically, the Martin Luther King representation in this case. And the way they both clashed in this series was not the way I remember it from back in the day. I feel like it was mainly the scheduling because I remember Magneto as the main villain of the series, but not really though because I remember Magneto showing up for at least a season and also a season and a half where he would deal with the relationship with him and Charles, him actually building Genosha, and it's funny looking at Genosha the way I see it in this series compared to how they dealt with it in Dark Phoenix, and I gotta say, wow, this could end up being a good story for a movie, and they kind of screwed it up. Even the Dark Phoenix saga, because I remember them doing Dark Phoenix in the movies. I'm like, they can't just get it right because I know X3 tried to do it with also using the plot of the Cure. And when Dark Phoenix was announced, it was intentionally a two-part movie where we would get the Phoenix saga for the first one, then go into the Dark Phoenix saga for the second one, then leading into Mr. Sinister. But none of that happens in this series the way I thought it was because we actually get certain 4 or 5 part storylines where each of them would delve with a certain part of the comics dealing with Phoenix, Apocalypse, even Days of Future Past, which I'm like, I like the movie version, but I feel like if they were to do an actual comic adaptation of it, it could have worked and also could have fed into the main line of the stories we have now in the X-Men fixing the timelines. Not only that, but also certain with little Marvel crossover moments too, because I remember watching X-Men then Spider-Man, and I remember Spider-Man crossing over with the X-Men and including the Fantastic Four, even Iron Man in this case. But in this show, it's kind of funny that in certain moments you would get a character introduction where they would show a little photo or character cameo, because I remember them showing Spider-Man like just throw a web up in there and War Machine come up and save somebody. Even Miss Marvel, which I gotta say, it's kind of funny looking at how Miss Marvel was as to the people I know, because Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers, was never Captain Marvel to me. She was always Miss Marvel in the black leotard. Even characters like Punisher and Ghost Rider get a cameo, even though they're not in the series for that long. All I can say is that looking further along, expecting X-Men 97 to continue off the story, I feel like the way X-Men 97 could go down is that I don't even know if it's going to take place a year or a couple of years after what happened in the finale. It's called 97 because I'm like, 97 was basically the end run of this portion of the X-Men, but I feel like if they're going to keep going, it has to take place at least a day or a couple hours in between, because hopefully this series ends up being good. I know the animation is going to be a weird thing to struggle with, because I'm used to the hand-drawn comic accurate 2D animation where everything was hand-drawn. Most of the characters look like how they do in the comics. Even their physicalities look nice, especially Rogue. I know they're going to limit it down with computer animation and stuff, but hopefully they don't take away what the good spirit of the show was. And with Deadpool and Wolverine coming out, hopefully we could get some inspiration of these characters in the live action realm at some point. These are my quick thoughts about X-Men the Animated Series. If you like the show, it's on Disney Plus right now for 5 seasons. As you prepare for X-Men 97, which you know they're going to do that previously on X-Men before you even watch the actual series. All right, you guys, thank you guys for watching. Leave a like if you like this video. Subscribe if you haven't already. All my social media down in the description below. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye, guys.